Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of African News Review. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me today is Fubara Eneli Esquire, author, Kwanzaa, A Celebration, host, Rethinking Freedom, co-host, Women and Resistance, and now added new co-host, Griot and Books. So a string of co-hosting. Welcome, sister.
String of unpaid jobs. Thank you very much. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
And welcome to everyone who's watching as well.
Yes. Welcome to our regular viewers and welcome to everyone. Unfortunately, Brother Milton Alimadi is not here. He's taken to another task and he should be back next week. That said, news from where you are.
Well. A couple of things. First and foremost, we had a couple of elections that took place. Sylvester Turner, who was a Democrat, passed away, and so his seat was vacant, and Greg Abbott had delayed the election, the special election, to fill that seat, to keep the power in the hands of the Republicans for as long as he could. But finally, that special election took place, and Christian Menifee won that. He's a Democrat, so he defeated Democrat Amanda Edwards to fill that vacant seat. And of course, that narrows the Republican majority in the U.S. House. Making it even more difficult for Mike Johnson, who essentially has eroded the power of Congress to check the power of the executive. And so that is good news for those who are still concerned about this dying, quote unquote, democracy in the United States. But then something else significant happened also in our elections. So, in Texas, they did this whole racial gerrymandering to once the convicted felon in chief reached out to Abbott again to demand 5 seats. Yeah. And they quickly acquiesced and met that demand. But in doing so, they also diluted seats that were solidly Republican seats. And that has come back to bite them because there was also a special runoff for a Republican-held state Senate seat in Tarrant County, which is in North Texas, and a Democrat won that seat. Taylor Remmet beat Lee Wamganas, I think is how you say her name. And now that seat is only open, that the person's term only has another 11 months, so there will be another election for it. So they get to redo this. But in the interim, it is very noteworthy that a Democrat did beat a Republican in what used to be a solidly Republican seat. And so that may portend what is to come if the people go out and vote.
It's key if they use and apparently in Texas last year, I was listening to a gentleman, I believe it was with the Get Out to Vote. He was saying 1.3 million Texans stayed away from voting. So imagine what would happen if.
And there's so many things that they've done. Texas actually has the worst policies and laws in terms of voting, in terms of access to voting. Most of the things that were done in 2020 that ensured more access to the ballot box, they've rolled back all of those things. They definitely have tried to impact mail-in voting, even people being able to do drive-through voting, especially for those who have any physical disabilities. And of course, we know and we strongly believe that ICE is going to be weaponized in Texas to help dissuade people from coming out to exercise their right to vote. And so this is going to be an interesting state to look at in terms of what happens, but they might also suppress their own votes as they continue to try to racially gerrymander what's going on here. And something else that happened is Ken Paxton, who should be in jail, who had been
Attorney
indicted
General.
for corruption and went through an impeachment process. And despite all of the evidence that should have led to his impeachment, was let off by, again, the Republican majority, he did go to court to try and prevent Latino group from being able to get out the vote activities. And the courts just smacked that down and said that they absolutely had every right to carry on with their activities. And so we'll see how things turn out. But so far, so good. But people, register to vote, check your registration, and please talk to friends and neighbors and convince them that they are not doing themselves any favors. They are not being revolutionaries by choosing not to vote.
True. Somebody said in the chat, there's an old adage that says when you dig one hole, you might as well take a shovel along and dig two.
Yeah.
That's true. So anything on national level in the United States? I don't want to see you guys
my understanding is that 3 million documents related to the Epstein files have been dumped. I will be honest with you, I have not gone to check out what these documents say. They've seen little things here and there about names that have been mentioned. What really stands out for me is that America has always harbored and even celebrated sex traffickers and human traffickers. We know that because most of us who are of African descent were human trafficked. We know that because when we check our DNA, while there were some consensual relationships, most of them were not consensual relationships. And so this is baked into the DNA of this country. While they did not do a decent enough job of redacting some sensitive information related to the victims, they are still covering up the clientele, if you will. Who were all of these men and maybe women who were engaged in these acts against these young women?
Young girls.
And why is no one being, I have not heard of any investigation into anybody else. I know that the Congress, the Judicial Oversight Committee is moving forward with their contempt charges against the Clintons for refusing to testify behind closed doors. They said they will testify, but they want to do it publicly. And so it's just interesting how this country continues to harbor the worst of the worst. And of course, Trump's name is all over those documents and some very salacious things from what I have heard, but I have not really spent my time going through those documents.
Okay. It's curious thinking that from initial find, obviously, they've been downloaded in PDF files. And the initial assessment is that his name appears in the document 5,236 times. Let us
but his lying press, what is her name? Carolyn, whatever her name is. She said that there are other people named Donald Trump, that there's a plumber named Donald Trump. So even if you see his name, it's not this Donald Trump. And even though they mentioned Mar-a-Lago, it has nothing to do with the felon in chief. Even though he said we grabbed them by their, because we can't. It's not him.
Yeah, okay. So while...
And so-called Christians in church today are still worshiping their golden calf. Yeah.
Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight. Well, while that is going on, the world has sort of started to contend with the fact that the United States might have just stepped up the mantle of its grand empire. By that I mean the UK Prime Minister was in China, hoping to build relationships with China. And from that, we've got the initial assessment that China would be allowed to build its ginormous embassy in the UK. And by extension, Brits can now visit China visa-free.
And I believe that simultaneously, United States of America is contemplating closing quite a few of their embassies across the African continent.
Yeah.
And Stephen Miller has said the quiet part out loud, which is that there should be a labor class and those people should not have the rights to vote and should not have benefits like any regular human being, which harkens to arguments that were made by a one-time senator, I think Hammonds, what's his name, back in the 1800s, justifying slavery, justifying the enslavement of Africans. So here we are again.
Yeah, I mean, somebody said it this week, and it was quite. It said history rhymes that George Washington and Donald Trump have a lot in common.
Absolutely.
He said he's got nothing to do with their governance. Let's just leave it at that. So that said, we go into our news review for this week. And the first news actually starts in the United States. And it's that Mr. Kennedy has decided we're going to turn African babies into guinea pigs. Excuse the pun. And so the first news comes from New York Times, and it reads, Kennedy plans to test a vaccine in West African baby in West blocked. A planned U.S.-funded study of hepatitis B vaccine drew widespread condemnation from researchers. Now the host country said it cannot proceed. The West African nation of Guinea-Bissau has suspended a controversial U.S.-funded study of hepatitis B vaccine in infants there after an outcry from public health researchers over the ethics of the work. The study, which was supposed to be carried out by Danish researchers, swiftly became the subject of furor in public health world, with researchers in Africa and the United States saying that it violated key tenets of ethical science. A Trump administration health official said the study had been paused. International agreements on medical research in humans require researchers to offer the global accepted standard of care, in this case, vaccination at birth, to any participant in a clinical trial. So, what was your initial thought when you got this story?
My brother, I do not blame colonizers and oppressors for doing what they feel is in their best interest. You know, I happen to raise chicken who lay eggs. I have certain kind of wiring around their coop, and I take other precautions because I know that it is in the nature of certain animals to be drawn to this chicken coop and to be drawn to the eggs. If I leave them open and exposed, I cannot then be astounded at what a snake or a fox or, even a raccoon chooses to do, right? Because I know the nature of these animals. I'm not calling RFK an animal, although, of course, all human beings are animals to some. Yeah. With African countries, I believe there are 14 of them so far, signing these memoranda of understanding with the United States of America to provide health services and so on and so forth in African countries. I'm just thinking, what are you thinking? Particularly with this regime, but really with any American regime, if you are in a subservient position. Because if RFK is willing to sacrifice American children, we have outbreaks of measles across the United States of America now. We have children who are dying of diseases that they could have been vaccinated from and protected from. Why would you get into any kind of partnership with such an entity? And so it should not be surprising to any of us. And certainly when I read this, it's like, of course they did this. Of course they don't see us as human beings to begin with. And we know that Guinea-Bissau is a country that is struggling financially. They have a population of just 2 million people. We know that they have been, after being colonized by Portugal for centuries and fighting their brutal liberation war that went on till 1974. Some of you may know Amilcar Cabral, and we know what happened to him. We know about the repeated military coups, or at least we should. That this is a country that presents not as much resistance to the United States of America. They probably did not feel that there would be anyone that would care, that they would identify 14,000 children in this place. And like you said, use these children as guinea pigs. So reminiscent of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where you know that you already have medical evidence that if children are treated in a certain way, this prevents certain diseases, you intentionally deny them that treatment to see what happens. But what we also know is that this is not the first time that it has been done. And unfortunately, if we don't learn, this will not be the last time. So basically what they wanted, so other times that this has been done, just to put this in some context, in the 1990s in East and Southern Africa with HIV/AIDS drugs, the U.S. funded trials where African women were given placebos. Even though effective treatment was already in existence, basically thousands of babies were infected and died because their mothers were denied effective treatment. And the justification was, well, they wouldn't have had access to the drug anyway. So the fact that we gave some the drug and some we didn't, hey, yeah, it's not a big deal at all, which is in direct opposition to the Declaration of Helsinki, right? Helsinki, where they acknowledged that there needed to be one ethical standard for how we treated everyone. But apparently the world is showing there's one for Africans and there's one for everyone else. But of course, they do this with economics. They do this with everything else. We saw this again in 1996 with Pfizer. They had their Trovan trial in Kano. And what Pfizer did was they tested an experimental antibiotic on children during a meningitis outbreak. Parents were not properly informed. Some children died. Others were permanently disabled. The Nigerian government did sue Pfizer, but I couldn't till today tell you what that settlement was and how much of it actually reached the victims. No executives of Pfizer faced any criminal responsibility because no humans were involved. And of course, we saw that throughout the colonial era, medical experiments in Belgian Congo, in French West Africa. We saw forced vaccination campaigns. Of course, we see Bill Gates every other day. He's coming up with some other thing that they want to try on our children. And it just goes on. And I could give so many, many other stories because Africans are biologically different. Our pain tolerance is mythologized. And of course, we see that here in the United States. Whether you talk about all of the experiments, gynecological experiments that were done on Black women, of course, without any kind of anesthesia, because, hey, we don't feel pain. And what does it matter anyway if we are in pain? And we saw that even with the vaccine testing proposals in 2020, where again, French doctors were publicly suggesting that Africa be used as a testing ground for COVID vaccines. So I say all of this, and then we see it with pharmaceutical dumping. We see it with environmental dumping. We've seen it with even the baby formulas that are dumped on Africa that have a very different formulation than what is served to children in quote unquote the developed countries. And so for me, with all of this, it's African leaders, we all have a responsibility to take care of ourselves. And we cannot abdicate that responsibility to other people because we have all the proof in the world that they do not care about us. I don't know if I need to do the Michael Jackson dance all I want to say is that they don't really care about us, right? And rather than take their money and their disease and everything that comes with it, let's turn inwards and heal ourselves and stop inviting death through the hands of these would-be saviors, because they are not coming to save us. Yeah, it was people outside, because these were two Danish researchers who have been roundly criticized by their own peers. They could not conduct this research anywhere else in the world. But RFK linked up with them and like, oh, I got an inroad for you. And while we're defunding all of these other universities in the United States in real scientific studies, we're going to put 1.6 billion or something towards this study. Because again, these Black people don't matter. And of course, for those who want to go further with this, if you get the book Medical Apartheid, yes, who really went into great detail about the history of medical abuse and experimentation and exploitation of Black Americans. But that same ideology is what we see being carried out across the African continent as well. Yes, Peggy Miller brings up Dr. Sims. And it was just recently that his statue started to be torn down. But prior to that, he was, again, the way we venerate these absolutely vile human beings in the United States of America, he was lifted up as this great researcher and amazing human being, even though he had caused so much harm to so many. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to say, unlike the United States, where you have the head of your Department of Health not even being a physician, that it is important to put people in positions who have expertise so that they even know what it is that they're reading and they understand the implications of whatever is coming across their desks. And sometimes across the African continent as well, we're putting cronies into positions who may not have the background to even decipher the information that they're signing, the documents that they're signing. So that's, yes, they didn't understand. The other thing is transparency. So many of our African governments are signing these documents, making these agreements without even the governmental apparatus knowing what these agreements are. And this is across this is with loans, this is with, all kinds of treaties, all of these memoranda that they're signing. And it's really imperative that there's some transparency so that even if the 14,000 children, because trust me, they weren't going to be targeting the children of quote unquote the educated, the elites. Most of them actually probably don't get their health care in Guinea-Bissau. Most African elites travel outside of Africa to get their medical care. So again, it's going to be burdening those who are already so burdened. Maybe those who are not literate in that particular language or cannot read. And so it's important that we have that transparency. And it's important that just like, people came out and a lot of Black Texans came out and voted during these past elections across the continent, we must fight. The average Black person, the average African must fight for a government that serves them, and we must get out of office these elitists who are not looking out for the interests of the whole. And maybe we should take down all the pictures of white Jesus. No, not being facetious. The reason I say that is there's a conflation between, well, Jesus saves, and every time a white person shows up, they are they embody everything that you think about Jesus. And so you don't even scrutinize anything that they say or do because, my God, they left the lap of luxury to come and care about the wretched of the earth. And we are just so grateful to them. And they just get a pass. And so someone can be digging ditches in America or anywhere in Europe and then show up with white skin and let them not have blonde hair and blue eyes to Africa, and all of a sudden they can become a king or a queen, and all kinds of doors open up to them. This savior mentality and this idea of, a white savior complex is something that we need to get rid of. It's a virus in our minds. You're not going to give me any happy stories today, bruh. So a song that is coming to mind right now. There comes a time when we There's a call and the world must come together. No, really, listen, the image we have of Africa is so simplistic, and I get it. I get feeling, hey, what can I do as an individual? I get it because I once sponsored a child for about 3 years. And then, of course, at this time, we sponsor a school in Opobo in Nigeria where we're paying salaries and fixing up the school and all of that, where we're funding a library. So I get it. We want to make a difference. And I struggle even when I'm fundraising with how I present the need because there's this whole narrative of us being poor and poverty stricken. And yet Africa isn't poor. If Comrade Alamati was here, he would say we're not poor, we're impoverished. And more than just giving alms, like we do here in the United States, where it's like, oh, okay, well, I donated to the food pantry, which is great. It's what if we actually paid people a living wage so that they did not need to depend on the food pantry? But we almost like this sense of having people dependent on us because it gives us this superior morality, this sense of, and look at how benevolent I am. I have to like check myself even in the work that I'm doing. And so in reading this, grateful that they are finally coming to terms with this because, again, we know that most of that money did not even go to the communities or to the children. They went to administrative fees. They were people living really large over these donations. But more than that, it's can we stop the harmful policies that impoverish these areas so that those areas can actually thrive, right? That is really what it is. So I have a friend who right here in my community who has a foundation that builds wells across different parts of southern Nigeria. And every time I go to one of her galas, and I love her dearly, and if she's watching this, don't hear this as a criticism. There are all of these really wealthy white people, and they're buying, earrings for like $500 or whatever to make a difference for these people. And I'm like, and at the same time, you guys are voting MAGA. At the same time, you guys are voting to hurt people. At the same time, you are the ones with these backing policies that make it so difficult for these countries to survive economically. And so, like Malcolm X would say, if you stab me with a knife and you put it 6 inches in my back and then you draw it out 3 inches, am I supposed to turn around and start worshiping you and thanking you? The reason I even have a knife in my back in the first place is because of you. And so, thankfully, yes, they want to decolonize, which means to undo some systems and logics and the habits of domination. What we're going to create in its stead, let's see what that's going to look like. But what we really need is advocate for real policy changes. And right now, I don't see any corporations that are pushing back against the policies of Trump's regime that are causing real harm. I don't see corporations that are saying, hey, how we're doing business is hurting these countries. I don't see people pushing back against the IMF or the World Bank and all of these other investors with these draconian interest rates. And that's really where the change needs to happen. But I'm looking at, for instance, Ethiopia and what they were able to do with their dam. When the World Bank says we wouldn't fund it, even though it took them 14 years, they turned inwards and they found a way to do it themselves. Maybe all of these programs being dismantled and all of that will cause us to stop having our hand out and to look inwards and to figure out how we solve our own problems. Because we have 60% of the world's arable land is in Africa. We can feed ourselves. We can take care of ourselves. But for all of us, as we do what we can to help Africa, please don't put yourself in that savior mentality. Africa is where it is because we have not fought for or we have supported policies that have hurt Africa. And if we really want to help, even as you might fund, someone's education or fund a school or whatever, and all of those things are helpful, we really need to be pushing back against international corporations, against the U.S. government, and for those of you who are listening internationally, against your governments and what they are doing to impoverish Africa and our communities. Yeah, they're very complicit because it's amazing how in 2020 and 2021, you had all of these corporations that were suddenly for diversity and equity and inclusion. And boom, in the blink of an eye, those same corporations cannot wait to build a gilded ballroom. They cannot wait to turn back. No, now we're going to fire everybody, and white men have been discriminated against, and we're opposed to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Just like that. These people have no morals whatsoever. None. Prison. I think it's just us lying to ourselves and trying to assuage our guilt, not really looking at how we are responsible for the very issues that we claim we're trying to solve. And again, it's this sense of, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, so I am working harder than anyone else. As an attorney, unfortunately, I don't do evictions, but I've been in court a number of times where, an eviction hearing has happened before my hearing or something of that nature. And this is across the United States, but certainly where I live right now, if you are working a full-time job, making even $15 an hour, you cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment and a car payment, and you cannot eat 3 meals a day. Actually, you cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment, forget car and everything else. And we don't have a decent public transportation system. And so people these are hardworking people. You're working 40 hours a week. Now, remember, minimum wage is not $15 an hour. So I've actually doubled the minimum wage. And so when we don't fight for those kind of things, when we don't dismantle the systems that are creating the problems, but then we turn around and say, well, I gave 10% of my tithe, or I gave this so I can get a tax deduction, or it makes us feel good when we're actually part of the problem because we really do not want to fight for a solution. And I don't know if we do it because that makes us feel like we're somehow better than other people, or I'm not really sure. We might need to bring a psychologist on to explain the psychology of it all. But this is something that we see worldwide, where you see this even amongst friends. I want my friend to do well, but I don't want them to do better than me or even as well as me, because I still need to feel that I'm somehow better than they are. And if they start doing as good as I am or doing a little better, whatever my measurements are for better, then now there are issues in the relationship. Human beings, we really need to check this ego and to decide, what does success look like? What does it look like to really love one another? What kind of world do we want? Even as we set goals, it's still the beginning of the year, and some of us have set financial goals. I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a multi-billionaire, whatever the case might be. How does that improve the world? And maybe I'm thinking, well, if I have more money, I can do more good. Yeah, but what if money was more equitably disbursed? Then maybe someone else isn't so impoverished that they're now dependent on me to even feed them. Maybe we all get to live in a 3-bedroom house as opposed to some are homeless, and some of us have a first home, a winter home, a summer home, and then an Airbnb that we make money from. Yeah. Some or all? Okay, some. Heavily. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, we have to listen, we have to produce flowers because Valentine's Day is around the corner, and people in the West have to give roses and all of that to show their love. Yeah. And we need the chocolate because nothing says I love you like chocolate, flowers, and diamonds from African mines. Got it. Yeah, there we go. Listen, I have a great idea for them. How about they all start to rally for the IMF, World Bank, and all of these entities to cancel 100% of Africa's debt? No. Listen, Trump got to file bankruptcy. What, 4, 5, 6 times? You basically get to start over. It gives you a chance to, okay, I made some mistakes, paid, okay, let's start over. How does Africa ever dig out of this hole? Think of your own, your personal finances. If you make $100, £100, wherever it is you're living, 100, whatever your currency is, and you're spending 45% of that, so $45 in my case, on servicing your debt. Servicing means you're paying the interest. You're not paying down the principal. $45 of my $100 I made is just servicing my debt. I've not eaten. I've not put a roof over my head. I've not put on clothes. I have not taken care of my children. I have no health care, nothing. How could I ever survive? How do I ever dig out of that? So how about, no, seriously, just like they went and rebuilt the Marshall Plan, rebuilt Europe. Where has there been a Marshall Plan for Africa after colonization? As collateral. And Thomas Sankara tried to say this years ago, like Ciara is saying in the chat, if all of Africa banded together and said, we're not paying it, and we are going to put our heads together and figure out how we solve our own issues, how we make sure that everyone across the continent eats and it's taken care of, we can do it. But at this point, we're making these agreements left, right, and center with people who we know do not mean us well. And he said, yes, if I alone say I'm not paying the debt, I'm going to be dead. Yeah. And he was. I think you should share your thoughts based on the history of the place. I went to school with Gowan's son. No, I liked Idiabon. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, Idiabon actually did some good things for the country. Yes. It was short-lived. I don't even know that you can truly make a distinction between military coups and then political side. Because Obasanjo was in the military, and then he came back as a civilian and ran the country. So, yeah. Anyway, carry on. Hey, be careful. Operation Feed the Nation. I mean, if you're not tagging Trump and his coins and this new arch in the ballroom and plane and all of that is corrupt, we're just governing. What are you talking about? Anyway, carry on. Mm-hmm. You know what? On this one, I would say that having lived outside of the country for so long, that I'm not sure that I'm in a place to make that assessment, because I do know that people are desperate in Nigeria. And that while there are, we don't have a middle class anymore in Nigeria, that there are quite a few people who, quite frankly, will not care who is in power so long as there is an ability for people to feed themselves and some hope for the future. Because right now, our young people are languishing. The corruption with Tinubu's, with the Wike and all of them, and I know some of you were getting into the weeds here. It's so blatant. With everything that has happened in the history of that country, to my knowledge, I've not seen a more corrupt Supreme Court than what we have now in Nigeria, and what they did with Tinubu's ascendancy to the presidency. I need to take care of myself because I do plan to go back to Nigeria, and, I could get arrested for what I'm saying. My father has been arrested for saying less. So I do not need to kind of watch myself a little bit here. But what I'm saying is that when people are desperate, I'm not sure that there is not an appetite. Now, it's hard also for me to make an assessment on this because it has been so hush-hush. We don't know, at least I have not been able to ascertain the names of these 16 officials. I don't know their ranks. And I don't know what their ethnicity is because, that always plays a role in Nigeria. So is this in any way tied to Biafra, to IPOB? Is this Northerners who are wanting to maybe impose Sharia law. Like, where is the opposition coming from? Or is it a conglomeration of different ethnicities that are coming together? So at this point, I don't have enough information to really speak intelligently at this point on this coup. But what I will say is, yes, Nigeria is ripe for change, because what we currently have is not working. Yes, we are not. And I think that Tinubu knows that. And that's why they were so forceful in going into Benin Republic to make sure that they quashed that coup there, because that was a little too close to home. Because if you have Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Benin went that way, then hey, it would just be a matter of time before Nigeria as well. So someone is asking, is there any comparison between Moritala's regime and that of Sankara? A little bit. And if you're ever in Nigeria, you have to go to the museum to see. I actually took my children there to see. They still have the vehicle that he was in. Of course, not a vehicle made in Nigeria. It's a Mercedes-Benz, riddled with bullets. The vehicle. Yeah, but what are our reserves right now under Tinubu? Where our debt has almost tripled, and we have nothing to show for it. But then even just even what you just said now, that our reserves have to be in U.S. dollars. Oh my God! Let's move on to the next topic. Yeah. Hopefully, BRICS rises up and can help us change some things quickly here. Like and share. Yes, spread the good word. I'm glad that you did evoke Sheikh Anta Diop in his book, because of course we know this is not the first time that Sudan's history has been looted. And what we see happening in Sudan is also not actually even unique to Sudan. We saw that, those of us who were paying attention, during the Iraq War, where they went in and they just decimated centuries of artifacts and information that, hey, nobody knows where it is, but it's in somebody's basement of private collection. It'll show up years from now. It's probably collateral for some yachts or plane, or maybe a spaceship that is going to Mars or something. And so we know that in the 19th century and early 20th century, that European colonial expeditions removed Sudanese and Nubian artifacts for Western museums under the guise of scientific archaeology. We know that under Anglo-Egyptian rule from 1899 to 1956, Sudanese antiquities were cataloged and interpreted through colonial epistemologies. We know that because, again, it's always about trying to paint Africa as this primitive place with no culture, no history. And what they basically attempted to do was to sever Kushite and Nubian civilizations from African history. We know that these, having Sudan in this weakened state makes it very vulnerable to all of this illicit excavation and the trafficking. And so, again, anyone could have foreseen this that was paying attention. So the article in particular, as I was reading through it, notes that the Kushite gold room that housed artifacts from Napata and Meroe were completely ransacked. So this is probably not just someone who is like, some soldier who doesn't know what they're doing. Yes, someone knows what they were doing and is very actively taking these items out. But the kingdom of Kush directly challenges this whole Eurocentric idea that Africa is peripheral to world civilization. And so, yes, if you gut it and we don't have any proof or evidence of who we are, any physical evidence that Africa produced any advanced states or any mythology or architecture or whatever, it's easier to continue to carry on these stories that we then imbibe and believe, hey, we are an inferior people, and so we should always be grateful for whatever the white man can come in and share with us. So now, looking at the RSF, and we've covered Sudan and the RSF on numerous occasions, this show, who are they and what are they about? And I don't know if you want to fill us in again on that, Adesoji, because RSF was never about. There is a distinction between the Arabs and the Black Africans, and they were never designed to protect Sudanese society, and certainly not Black Sudanese, right? And so you just have to wonder what is amiss here, beyond the fact that these are valuables that people can make money from. It's also the erasure that is very concerning to me as well. Museums should be neutral spaces. They should be places that are protected, even in times of war. They are places that affirm continuity. But when you do that, we're talking about memory and what happens when a people have no memory. If you have no memory, then you have no history, right? You have no history, you have no sense of yourself, you almost have no future. And so we should be very concerned about what's going on. Who are we going to get support from? Who's going to care? That's the question. Where are we going? Who's going to help fight this on the international level? Who is going to point out when they find these stolen artifacts and care about returning it? And is there even a Sudanese government in place that will say, yes, this is worth preserving, depending on whether that government is headed by people who, a Black African, or whether it is by someone who is like, to hell with those Black people. So those who have no history, have no present, have no future. So we should be very concerned about our erasure in this way, through the erasure of our artifacts. So what I would say to us, because I'm always looking for, okay, so what are the solutions here? I've had the opportunity now to go to Kemet twice. And the first time I went, I was just overwhelmed and just in awe and kind of in la la land. The second time I was a lot more deliberate, and God willing, if I get to go back again, I would be even more present. But I think us being very intentional about cataloging our own history, whether it's interviewing elders in your family or whether it's keeping your own memories. And certainly, like I have a notebook from when my grandmother was part of an organization where they lent money to each other because they could not get money from the colonial system. And they supported one another. And I have, where people would write in for what they needed the money for, and then the loans that would be given, and then when they would repay it, and so on and so forth. And I've kept that because it's proof of what we were able to do for ourselves. And so all of us have a role to play in preserving our history and our artifacts, because if we don't, then we stand to allow others to erase us. And we are living history today, right? Our lives today will become the history of tomorrow. So accumulate what you can, catalog what you can. And if you're ever in these spaces where you can see these things, museums or whatever, take your own pictures, catalog, keep evidence of it, because we never know when we're going to need that to prove not to others, but to ourselves the essence of who we are. My mother had said, don't call them subjects of imperialism. Yes, yes. I'm so grateful for this community. I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful for everybody. The chat has been blowing up today. I wish I knew your real names. I'm just looking at, I hope to meet all of you at some point in person, but thank you for us being able to just have these conversations and to think about these issues. And hopefully we can get some of our younger people, more involved and paying attention. One of the things that really hit home for me yesterday as we were going through the book by Shekanta Diop is that the education we receive should be put to use for our liberation. And, that man just followed his curiosity, but everything was geared not towards, can I get another letter behind my name, or can I get a new title, or can I get more money, but really about solving our own problems and figuring out how to liberate us. And when I talk to the young people in my life, it's like, how will you use your life in service to us as a collective? And so thank you so much for this forum and just this opportunity to delve into our issues, because it is sharpening me and helping me to make better choices with my time and my money. And there will be no more. There will be no more. No.
That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.